everybody. Sorry for the um, mess up. I will be giving you chapters 2 and 3 of Deep Blue. Like I said in the comments, chapter 2 starts on page 18, and here we go. Now, as you remember in the last chapter, Serafina's mom, Regina Isabella, came to talk to her about politics and the affairs of the realm, and you'll see what's going on in chapters 2 and 3. And here we go. Tears threatened as the doors closed behind Isabella, but Serafina held them back. Nearly every conversation with her mother ended in an awkward silence or heated words. Sarah was used to it, but still it hurt. A slender tentacle brushed Sarah's shoulder. Another circled around her neck, a third wound around her arm. Sylvester, finally attuned to his mistress's every mood, had turned blue with worry. She leaned her head against his. "I'm so nervous about Dokimi, Sylvester," she said. "My mother doesn't want to hear about it, but maybe Nila will. I've got to talk to somebody. What if Alethea tears my head off? What if I mess up my song spell? What if Maddie doesn't?" Serafina couldn't bear to voice that last thought, and it scared her even more than the ordeal that lay ahead. "Serafina, child, where are you? Your hairdresser is here." It was Tavia, her nurse, calling from her antechamber. Sylvester shot off at the sound of her voice. There was no more time to fret. Sarah had to go. She was expected by Tavia, by the Count of Malgus, by her entire court. "Coming," she called back. She started towards the doors, then halted. As soon as she opened them, she was no longer Serafina. She was "Your Grace," or "Your Majesty," or "Most Serene Principessa." She was theirs. She hated the hot spring atmosphere of her court. She hated the whispers, the glances, the toadying smiles. At court, she must dress just so. Always swim gracefully, never raise her voice. Smile and nod and talk about the tides when she'd much rather be riding Cleo or exploring the ruins of the Regia, Mira's ancient palace. She hated the suffocating weight of expectation, the constant pressure to be perfect, and the pointed looks and barbed comments when she was not. "2 minutes," she whispered. With a flick of her tail, she rushed to the opposite end, of her bedroom. She pulled open a pair of glass doors and swam onto her balcony, startling two small sea robins resting on its rail. Beyond the balcony was the royal city. Cerealia, broad and sprawling, had grown through the centuries from the first Mer settlement into the center of Mer culture that it was today. Ancient and magnificent, it had been built from blue quartz mined deep under the seabed. At this time of day, the sun's rays penetrated the devil's tail, a protective thorn thicket that floated above it, and struck the rooftops, making them sparkle. The original palace had been built in the center of Cerealia. The roof had collapsed several centuries ago, and a new palace was built on a seamount, high on a seamount. A baroque construction of coral quartz and mother of pearl for the royal family and its court. The ruins of the Regia still lay preserved within the city, a reminder of the past. Serafina's eyes traveled over Cerilia's winding streets to the spires of the Collegio, with its black Rome professors and enormous Ostracon, to the Gold Fathom, where tall townhouses, fashionable restaurants, and expensive shops were located, and then farther still, out past the city walls, to the Coliseo, where the royal flag of Miramora, a branch of red coral against a white background, and that of Matali, a dragon rampant holding a silver blue egg, was flying. Coliseo was where, in just a few short hours, Sarah would undergo her Dokimi in front of the court, the Matali royals, and the Mer of Miramara, and Mahdi. 2 years had passed since she had last seen him. She closed her eyes now and pictured his face, his dark eyes, his shy smile, his serious expression. When they were older, they would marry each other. Tonight, they would be betrothed. It was a ridiculous custom, but Serafina was glad he'd be the one. She could still hear the last words he'd spoken to her right before he had returned to Matali. My choice, he whispered, taking her hand. Mine, not theirs. Serafina opened her eyes. Their green depths were clouded, no, with worry. She had private conscience from him when he first returned home, carried by a trusted messenger. Every time one arrived, she would rush to her room and hold the shell to her ear, hungry for the sound of his voice. But after a year had passed, private conscience had stopped coming and official ones arrived. Instead, no, Batsy. In them, Maddie's voice sounded stilted and formal. About At about the same time, Serafina started to hear things about him. He'd become a party boy, some said. He stayed out shoaling until all hours, swam with the fast crowd, spent a fortune on mount for Kalabal, a game much like the Gog's polo. She wasn't sure she should believe the stories, but what if they were true? What if he'd changed? Serafina, you must come out now. Thalassa is due at any moment, and you know she doesn't like to be kept waiting, Tavia shouted. Coming, Tavia, Serafina called, swimming back into her bedroom. Serafina, great goddess Nerea, I said I'm coming. Daughter of Mero, chosen one. Serafina stopped dead. That wasn't Tavia's voice. It wasn't coming from the other side of the doors. It was right behind her. Who's there? She cried, whirling around. The end begins. Your time has come. Giovanna, is that you? Donatella? But no one answered her, because no one was there. A sudden darting movement to her left caught her eye. She gasped, then laughed with relief. It was only her looking glass. Vitrina was walking around inside it. Her mirror was tall and very old. Worms had eaten holes in its gilt frame, and its glass was pocked with black spots. It had been salvaged from a Terragog shipwreck. Ghosts lived inside it, Vitrina, souls of beautiful, vain humans who spent too much time gazing into it. The mirror had captured them. Their bodies had withered and died, but their souls lived on, trapped in the glass forever. The Countess lived inside Serafina's mirror, as did a handsome young duke, 3 courtesans, and an actor, and an archbishop. They often spoke to her. It was the Countess whom she had just seen moving about. Serafina rapped on the frame. The Countess lifted her voluminous skirts and ran to her, stopping only inches from the glass. She wore a tall, elaborately styled wig. Her face was powdered, her lips rouged. She looked frightened. Someone is in here with us, Princess, she whispered, looking over her shoulder. Someone who doesn't belong. They saw it at the same time, a figure in the distance, still and dark. Serafina had heard the mirrors were doorways to the in the water, and that one could open them if one knew how. Only the most powerful mages could move through the liquid silver world, though. Serafina didn't know anyone who ever had, not even Thalassa. As she and the Countess watched, the figure started moving toward them. That's no Vitrina, the Countess hissed. If it got in, it can get out. Get away from the glass. Hurry! As the figure drew close, Serafina saw that it was a river mermaid, her tail mottled in shades of brown and gray. She wore a cloak of black osprey feathers, its collar made of twining deer antlers rose high at the back of her head. Her hair was gray, her eyes piercing. She was chanting. The sands run out, our chant unbinds, inch by inch, our chant un... Let's try that again. The sands run out, our spell unwinds, inch by inch, our chant unbinds. Seraphina knew that voice. She heard it in her nightmare. It belonged to the river witch, Baba Viraja. The Countess had warned Seraphina to move away, but she couldn't. And it was as if she was frozen in place, her face only inches from the glass. Vraja beckoned her. Come, child, she said. Seraphina raised her hands slowly, as if in a trance. She was about to touch the mirror when Vraja suddenly stopped chanting. She turned to look at something Serafina couldn't see. Her eyes filled with fear. "No!" she cried. Her body twisted, then shattered. 100 eagles writhed where she had been. Then they dove into the liquid silver. Seconds later, Teragog walked into the frame, sending ripples through the silver. He was dressed in a black suit, his hair so blonde it was almost white. It was cut close to his head. He stood sideways, gazing at the last of the eels as they disappeared. One was slower than the rest. The man snatched it up and bit into it. The creature writhed in agony. Its blood dripped down his chin. He swallowed the eel, then turned to face the glass. Serafina's hands came to her mouth. The man's eyes were completely black. There was no iris, no white, just darkness. Now, I've read this series before, and I know who it is. He walked up to the glass and thrust a hand through it. Sarah screamed. She swam backward, crashed into a chair, and fell to the floor. The man's arm emerged, then his shoulder. His head was pushing through when Tavia's voice piped up. "Serafina, what's wrong?" she called through the door. "I'm coming in." The man glared hatefully in her direction. A second later, he was gone. "What happened, child? Are you all right?" Tavia asked. Serafina, shaking, got up off the floor. I saw something in the mirror. It frightened me and I fell," she said. Tavia, who had the legs and torso of a blue crab, scuttled over to the mirror. Serafina could see that it was empty now. There was no river witch inside, no Terragog in black. All she saw was her nurse's reflection. "Pesky Vitrina, you probably haven't been paying them enough attention. They get peevish if you don't fawn over them enough," Tavia said. "These were different. They were—" Tavia turned to her. "Yes, child?" "A scary witch from a nightmare and a Terragog with freaky black eyes," she was about to say until she realized it sounded insane. Different. I've never seen them before. That happens sometimes. Most Vitrina are right in your face, but occasionally you come across a shy one," Tavia said. She rapped loudly on the glass. "You quiet down in there, you hear? Or I'll put this glass in the closet." She pulled a seasick throw off a chair and dropped it over the mirror. "That will scare them. Vitrina hate closets. There's no one in there to tell them how pretty they are." Tavia righted the chair Serafina had knocked over, then chided her for taking so long to join her court. "Your breakfast is here. So is the dressmaker. You must come along. Now," she said. Serafina cast a last glance at her mirror, questioning herself already. Vraja wasn't real. She was of the iele, and the iele lived only in stories. And the hand cutting through the glass, that was simply a trick of the light, a hallucination caused by lack of sleep and nerves over her Dokimi. Hadn't her mother said that nerves were her foe? "Serafina, I am not calling you again," Tavia scolded. The princess lifted her head, swam through the doors to her antechamber, and joined her court. And that ends chapter 2. We're getting ready to start chapter 3, which starts on page 26. "No, no, no, not the ruby hair combs, you tow worm, the emerald combs. Go get the right ones," the hairdresser scolded. Her assistant scuttled off. "I'm sorry, but you're quite mistaken. Etiquette demands that the Duchess di Sarno precede the Countess di Sevilla to the Coliseo." It was Lady Giovanna, chatelaine of the chamber, talking to Lady Ottavia, keeper of the wardrobe. "These sea roses just arrived for the Principessa from Principe Bastian. Where should I put them?" a maid asked. A dozen voices could be heard, all talking at once. They spoke Mermish, the common language of the sea people. Serafina tried to ignore the voices and concentrate on her song spell. All those octave leaps, she whispered to herself. 5 high Cs, the trills, and arpeggios. Why did Meryl make it so hard? Songspell for the Dokimi had been composed specifically to test the future ruler's mastery of magic. It was cast entirely in Cantamiros, or special song. Cantamiros was a demanding type of magic That called for a powerful voice and a great deal of ability. It required long hours of practice to master, and Serafina had worked tirelessly to excel at it. Mira's casters could bend light, wind, water, and sound. The best could embody existing song spells or create new ones. Most mermaids of Serafina's age could only cast Kanta Prax or plain song spells. Prax was a practical magic that helped the mer to survive. There were camouflage spells to fool predators, echolocation spells to navigate dark water, spells to improve speed or darken an ink cloud. Prax spells were the first kind taught to mer children, and even those with little magical ability could cast them. Serafina took a deep breath now and started to sing. She sang softly, so no one could hear her, watching herself in a decorative mica panel. She couldn't rehearse the entire spell, she'd destroy the room, but she could work on bits of it. Alethea, you've never seen her? I have seen her twice now, my dear, and let me tell you, she's absolutely terrifying. That was elderly Baronessa Agnata talking to young Lady Cosima. They were sitting in a corner. The gray-haired Baronessa was wearing a gown in an alarming shade of purple. Cosima had on a blue tunic, a thick blonde braid trailed down her back. Serafina faltered, unnerved by their talk. You have no reason to fear her, so don't, had always been Isabella's advice, but from Sarah had heard of Alethea, that was easier said than done. The gods themselves made her. Bellagram, the smith, forged her, and Miriam breathed life into her, Agneta continued loudly, for she was quite deaf. Is there kissing during the Dokimi? I heard there's kissing, Cosima said, wrinkling her nose. A bit at the end. Close your eyes, that's what I do, the Baronessa said, sipping at her sargosity. The hot liquid, thick and sweet, like most mer drinks, sat heavily in an exquisite teacup. The teacup had been salvaged, as had all of the palace's porcelain from Terragog shipwrecks. The Dokimi has 3 parts, child, 2 tests and a vow. Why? Why, quia mero decrevit. That's Latin. It means because Mero decreed it, Cosima said. Yes, sorry, very good. Dokimi is Greek for trial, and a trial it is. Lethe appears in the first test, the blood song, to ensure each principessa is a true daughter of the blood. Why? Serafina asked. Quia mero decrevit, the Baronessa replied. She paused to put her cup down. The second test is the casting. It consists of a diabolically difficult song spell. A strong ruler must have a strong voice, for as you know, a mermaid's magic is in her voice. Why is that? Cosima asked. I've always wondered. Why can't we just wave a wand? It would be so much easier. Because the goddess Nerea, who gave us our magic, knew that song spells carry better and wanter than wand spells. Danger is everywhere in the seas, child. Death swims on a fast fin. But why do we sing our song spells, Baronessa? Why can't we just cast them? The Baronessa sighed. Do they actually teach you anything in school nowadays? She asked. We sing because song enhances magic. Why, song is magic. Cantare, more Latin. It means to sing. Yes, and from cantare come both chant and enchantment. Canto and incantation, music and magic. Think of the sounds of the sea, child. Whale song, the cries of gulls, the whispering of the waves. They are so beautiful and so powerful that all the creatures in the world hear the magic in them, even the tone-deaf terragogs. The Baronessa picked up a sea urchin from a plate, cracked its shell with her teeth, and slurped it down. If and only if the Principessa passes both tests, she said, she will then undertake the last part of the Dokimi, the promising. This is where she makes her betrothal vows and promises her people that she will marry the merman chosen for her and give the realm a daughter of the blood just as her mother did and her grandmother, and so on, all the way back to Mero. But why, Baronessa? Cosima asked. Good gods, another why? Quia Mero decrevit. That's why, Baroness said impatiently. But why? But what if Serafina doesn't want to marry and rule Miramar and give the realm a daughter? What if she wants to, open a cafe and sell bubble tea? Don't be ridiculous. Of course she wants to rule Miramar. The things you come up with. Agneta reached for another urchin. Cosima frowned, and Serafina smiled ruefully. For as long as she could remember, she had been asking the same questions and had been given the same answer. Quia mero decrevit. Like many rules of the adult world, a lot of Mary's inscrutable decrees made no sense to her. They still had to be followed, though, whether she liked it or not. Of course she wants to rule Mia Mara, the Baronessa had said, but the truth was, sometimes she didn't. She wondered for a few rebellious seconds what would happen if she refused to sing her song spell tonight and swam off and to sell bubble tea instead. Then Tavia wrapped her breakfast and started to chatter, and all such foolish thoughts disappeared. Here you are, my darling, she said, setting a silver tray down on the table. Water apples, eelberries, pickled sponge, your favorites. She slapped a green tentacle over. Silvestri, keep out of it. Thank you, Tavia, Serafina said, ignoring the tray. She wasn't hungry. She took a deep breath, preparing to practice her song spell again, but Tavia wasn't finished. I didn't get a chance to tell you this yet, she said, pressing a blue pincher to her chest. But Empress Ahadi's personal maid was in the kitchens this morning, getting tea for her mistress. I happen to know that she's very fond of Korshkin keelworms, so I made sure that she got plenty. After her second bowl, she told me that the Emperor is in good health and the Empress is as bossy as ever. Did she? Seraphina asked lightly. She knew she must not betray too much eagerness for news of the Metalis, especially the Crown Prince. A slight reaction to any news of him would be noted and commented upon. And the Princess Mila? How is she? When is she coming to my rooms? I'm dying to see her. I don't know, child, but Ahadi's maid, the one in the kitchens, she told me more things. Things about the Crown Prince, Tavia said conspiratorially. Isn't that nice? Serafina said. She knew that Tavia, a terrible gossip, desperately wanted her to ask what the things about the Crown Prince were, but she didn't. Instead, she practiced a trill. Tavia waited as long as she possibly could, and then the words burst out of her. Oh, Serafina, don't you know? Well, don't you want to know what else the maid said? She told me that the Crown Prince's scales are the deepest shade of blue, and he has an earring, and he wears his hair pulled back in a hippocampus tail. Maudie has an earring? Serafina exclaimed, forgetting for a moment that she wasn't supposed to be interested. That's ridiculous. Next he'll tell me he's dyed his hair pink and pierced his tail fin. The last time I saw him he was skinny and goofy, a total goby. Just like my brother. All he and Desideri wanted to do was play galleons and gorgons. Principessa, Tavia scolded. Crown Prince Maudie is heir to the Metallic Kingdom, and Principe Desiderio is a commander of this one, and neither would appreciate being called a goby. I should think you would at least be relieved to know that your future husband has grown into a handsome merman. Serafina shrugged. I suppose so, she said. You suppose so? It makes no difference if he's handsome or not, Serafina said. The crown prince will be my husband even if he looks like a sea slug. Yes, but it's easier to fall in love with a good-looking merman than a sea slug. Love has nothing to do with it, Tavia, and you know it. My marriage is a matter of state, not a matter of the heart. Royal alliances are made to strengthen bonds between realms and advance common interests. Fine words coming from one who's never actually been in love, Tavia sniffed. You're your mother's daughter. That's for certain. Duty above all. She scuttled off to try the chambermaid. Serafina smiled, pleased she'd thrown Tavia off the scent. If only she knew. But she didn't, and she wouldn't. Serafina kept her secret, and she wasn't about to reveal it now. She took a deep breath again and tried once more to practice her song spell. Coco, stop pestering Baroness Agneta and try on your gown, a voice scolded. This time it was Lady Electra, Cosima's older sister, who interrupted her. I'm so sorry for the grammar mistakes, guys. Gowns are boring, Cosima said, darting off. And then Seraphine heard another voice, secretive and hushed. Is that what you're wearing to the procession? You shouldn't try so hard to outshine the princess. There was laughter, throaty and low, and then a voice, beautiful and beguiling. I don't have to try. It's no contest. He's only going through with the betrothal because he has to. Everyone knows that. He couldn't care less about it. Or her. The words cut like shark's teeth. Seraphina dropped a note and bungled a measure. She looked straight ahead into the mica panel. In it she saw Lucia Volnero and Bianca de Ramora, two of her ladies in waiting. They were at the far end of the chamber, holding up a spectacular gown and whispering. They didn't know it, but the room's vaulted ceiling channeled sound. Words spoken on one side of the chamber could be heard on the other, just as the one speaking them could be seen in the mica panels. Bianca continued the conversation. What everyone knows, Mia Amica, is that you want him for yourself, she said. Better give up that idea. Why should I? Lucia said. A duchess's daughter is a catch too, don't you think? Especially this duchess's daughter. He certainly seems to think so. What do you mean? A clutch of us snuck out last night. We went to the lagoon. Seraphina couldn't believe it. The lagoon, the waters off the human city of Venice, was not far from Miramara, but it was forbidden to merfolk. It was a treacherous place, labyrinthine, dark, and full of dangerous creatures. It was also full of humans, the most dangerous creatures of all. You did not, Bianca said. Oh, yes, we did. It was totally riptide. We were shoaling all night. And Natalis, me, and a few other merles. It was wild, Lucia said. Did anything happen with you and the prince? Lucia smiled wickedly. Well, he really knows how to shoal. He has some fierce moves. And Bianca giggled. And? And what? Lucia's reply was drowned out by a group of chattering maids bustling in with gowns. Serafina's cheeks burned. She looked at the floor. She was hurt and furious. She wanted to tell Lucia that she'd heard every rotten word she said, but she didn't. She was royalty, and royalty did not shout. Royalty did not slap their tails. Royalty did not lose control. Ever. Those who would command others must first command themselves, her mother often told her. Usually, when she complained about sitting next to a dull ambassador at a state dinner, or got caught fencing in the grand hall with Desiderio. She glanced at Lucia again. She was always causing trouble. Why does she even have to be here? She wondered. But she knew the answer. Lucia was a member of the Volnero, a noble family as old and nearly as powerful as her own. The Volnero Duquesas had the right to be at court, and their daughters had the hereditary privilege of waiting upon the realmed Principessa. Lucia, with her sapphire eyes, her silver scales, her night blue hair swept up off her shoulders. You could bungle 100 trills if you looked like that, and nobody would even notice, Seraphina thought. Not that Lucia would bungle anything. Her voice was gorgeous. It was that the Volnera were descended from sirens. Seraphina didn't know if that was true. She knew that Portia, Lucia's mother, had once enchanted Seraphina's own uncle, Valerio. Portia and Valerio had wished to marry, but Artemisia, the reigning regina, and Valerio and Isabella's mother had forbidden the match. The Volnero had traitors in the branch of their family quarrel, and hadn't wanted her son to marry into a tainted line. Angry, Valerio had left Cerealia and spent several years in Sarno, a fortress town in western Miramar. Portia married someone else, Sejanus Adara, Lucia's father. Some said she only married him because he looked like Valerio, with his handsome face, silver scales, and black hair. Sejanus died only a year after Lucia's birth. Valerio never married, choosing to devote himself to the welfare of the realm instead. Portia had taught Lucia her secret, Serafina thought. Enviously, she sighed, thinking of how her mother taught her the correct form for addressing an Atlanticus foreign secretary, or that Parliament must be convened only during springtide, never a neaptide. She wished that once, just once, her mother would teach her something merely like which anemones to kiss, to get those pouty tentacle-stung lips, or how to make her tail fin sparkle. Stop it, Serafina, she told herself. Don't let Lucia get to you. Neither will know if Maddie went to the lagoon or not. Just practice. Your song spell. She comforted herself with the knowledge that her best friend would be here soon. Just seeing her face would make the whole ordeal easier. Serafina straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and a song spell. Your Grace, may I compliment you on your dress? A voice drawled from behind her. I hope you're wearing it tonight. Serafina glanced in the mica. It was Lucia. She was smiling like a barracuda. No, I'm not, but thank you, she said wearily. It wasn't like Lucia to be forthcoming with the compliments. What a pity. You should. It's so simple and fresh. Totally genius. Contrast, I'm sorry, is absolutely the way to go in a situation like this, Lucia said. Contrast, Serafina said, puzzled. She turned to Lucia. Your look, it's a fabulous contrast. Serafina looked down at her dress. It was a plain light blue sea silk gown. Nothing special. She changed into it hastily right after she'd swum into the antechamber. My look is all one color, blue, and we're in the sea, Lucia. So it really doesn't contrast with anything. Ha! That is so funny, Your Grace. Good for you for joking about it. I'm glad it doesn't bother you. Don't let it. Merboys will be merboys, and anyway, I'm sure he's given her up by now. The whole room had gone quiet. Everyone had stopped what she was doing to listen. Blood sport was the court's favorite game. Lucia, who's he? Who's her? What are you talking about? Serafina asked, confused. Lucia's eyes widened. She pressed a hand to her chest. You don't know. I'm such an idiot. I thought you knew. I mean, everyone knows. I'm sorry. It's nothing. I made a mistake. She started to swim off. But she had never admitted to making a mistake. Serafina saw a chance to best her, to pay her back for the mean things she'd said, and though a voice inside told her not to, she took that chance. What mistake, Lucia? She asked. Lucia, Lucia stopped. Really, Your Grace, she said, looking deeply embarrassed. I wouldn't like to say. No, tell me. If you insist, Lucia replied. I do. As soon as the words left her lips, Serafina realized she was the one who made the mistake. Lucia turned around. Her barracuda smile was back. She had only been feigning embarrassment. I was talking about the crown prince and his merle friend, she said. Well, his latest one. His merle friend? Serafina said. She could barely breathe. That's enough, Lucia. You're going too far, Bianca hissed. But Bianca, no. Would you have me defy our principessa? She wishes me to speak, Lucia said. She fixed her glittering eyes on Serafina. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you, especially on the day of your Dokimi. I was certain you knew, otherwise I never would have mentioned it. I only meant to compliment you by telling you that your look was a contrast to hers. All she is going for is blonde hair, turquoise scales, and more curves than a whirlpool. Lucia, triumphant, dipped her head. Serafina felt humiliated, but she was determined not to show it. This was her own fault. She'd stupidly fallen right into Lucia's trap, and now she had to swim out. Lucia, thank you so much for telling me, she said, smiling. It's such a relief to know. I hope she's taught him a few things. I beg your pardon, your grace? Look, we all know it. It's no secret. The last time the crown prince visited, he was a bit of a goby and pretty hopeless with morals, Serafina said. You're not upset? Not at all. Why would I be? I just hope she's done a good job with him. Taught him a few dance strokes or how to send a proper launch. Someone has to. Mer boys are like hippocamps, don't you think? No fun until they're broken in. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really do need to practice. Lucia thwarted, turned on her tail, and swam away. And Serafina, a big smile still on her face, resumed her song spell. The performance cost her dearly, but no one would have known. Used to the ways of her court and its sharp teeth and claws, she was an expert at hiding her feelings. Sylvestra, however, was not. Crimson with anger, the octopus swam after Lucia. When he got close to her, he siphoned in as much water as he could hold, then shot a fat jet of it at her. Hitting her squarely in the back of her head, her updo collapsed. Lucia stopped dead. Her hands went to her head. My hair! She screeched, whirling around. Sylvestre, Serafina exclaimed, horrified. Apologize. Sylvestre affected a contrite expression, then squirted Lucia again in the face. You little sucker, I'll gut you, she sputtered. Varus, after him. The chief's pet scorpion fish zipped after the octopus. Sylvestre darted under the table where Serafina's breakfast tray was resting. Varus followed him. The table went over, the tray went flying. Sylvestre grabbed a water apple and fired it at Varus. Varus ducked it and charged. He swam up to Sylvestre and stung him. Sylvestre howled, and a few seconds later, Serafina's ancient chamber was engulfed by a roiling cloud of black ink. Serafina could see nothing, but she could hear her ladies coughing and shrieking. They were crashing into tables, chairs, and one another. When the cloud finally cleared, she saw Lucia and Bianca wiping ink off their faces. Giovanna was shaking it out of her hair. Tavi was threatening to hang Silvestre up by his tentacles. And then another voice, majestic and fearsome, was heard above the fray. In olden days, the royals had their unruly nobles beheaded. What a pity that custom fell out of use. And ladies and gentlemen, this ends chapters 2 and 3. I appreciate all the comments you're going to make, and thank you for being so patient with me. Have a good night.